You know, if there is one question that just constantly echoes through the veteran community right around this time of year, it's this. How much are VA disability and Social Security payments actually going up next year?
Oh, absolutely. It is the number everyone is waiting for, right?
Right. And usually for the first half of the year, we're all just kind of throwing darts at a board. But we actually just got the very first piece of the official puzzle. July's inflation data has officially dropped.
Yeah, which means the whole speculation phase is over. We are finally getting our first real, mathematically grounded look at that 2027 pay raise.
Exactly. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Veteran Briefing. Our mission for this deep dive today is to really unpack these brand new 2027 cost of living adjustment or CLA projections.
We've got a stack of fresh data to get through, including some new reporting from CNBC and some really great recent analysis from Veterans Info Tab.
Yeah, and we are going to explore exactly how this math works under the hood. We'll be looking at current projections, which are ranging from about 3.4% to 3.6%, and discussing what those numbers actually mean for your wallet, your purchasing power, and your overall financial strategy as a veteran.
It is just such a critical topic to dissect because, the word inflation gets thrown around on the news every single night, and it's usually painted with a really broad brush.
Oh, for sure.
A lot of people just assume the government is looking at the entire calendar year, like measuring how expensive eggs were in March or what gas costs in April, and then just averaging it all out to give you a raise.
Right, but the mechanics of the cost of living adjustment are entirely different, and they're highly, highly specific. The timeline is incredibly rigid.
It really is. The Blue LA is not based on the whole year at all. It relies strictly on economic data from the third quarter.
So we are talking specifically and exclusively about the months of July, August, and September. I always kind of think of this third quarter window like a financial final exam.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, because it really does not matter how much inflation was surging during the spring semester, or if prices just completely spiked back in February.
Right. The government only cares about the grades the economy gets on the final. Just July, August, and September. Those 3 months are the only ones that actually dictate your final COA score.
Exactly.
And that final exam analogy captures the timeline perfectly. But the specific subject they're testing on, the actual metric used to grade that exam, is something called the CPI-W.
Right, the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers.
Yeah, it's a mouthful. But to understand your raise, you really have to understand this index. The Bureau of Labor Statistics essentially creates this giant imaginary shopping basket filled with the goods and services that a typical wage earner buys.
So we're talking about very specific weightings for housing, transportation, food, apparel, medical care, all of that.
Exactly. They track the price of this very specific basket of goods month over month.
Which means, if you are spending a disproportionate amount of your fixed income on something that isn't heavily weighted in that specific CPI-W basket, say, certain out-of-pocket medical expenses or maybe specialized rural transportation costs, your personal experience of inflation might feel vastly different than the official government number.
And that structural mismatch is exactly why so many veterans on fixed incomes feel this huge disconnect between the announced TOLA and their actual bank accounts.
It's frustrating for a lot of people.
It is, yeah. But regardless of how perfectly it aligns with an individual's spending, the CPI-W is the absolute legal yardstick for the adjustment.
Which brings us to the big news. We just got the very first grade back from that final exam. On August 12th, the July 2026 CPI-W number was officially released, coming in at 327.104.
Right, and a standalone number doesn't mean much until you compare it to the baseline from the previous year's third quarter, which was 317.265.
Exactly, and running that math, the new July number sits exactly 3.1% above the baseline.
So we've established our floor. We are sitting at a 3.1% increase, just based on that July snapshot alone. It sets the baseline expectation for the rest of the quarter.
But what trips a lot of veterans up here is that they just ignore the CPI-W altogether because it's technically a Social Security metric.
All the time.
Right. A veteran in their 30s or 40s drawing VA disability might think, well, I don't draw Social Security retirement, so why should I care what this index does?
Right. But because of how Title 38 legislation is written, our VA benefits are actually tethered directly to that specific Social Security math.
Exactly. By default, whatever cost of living adjustment is determined for Social Security automatically triggers the exact same percentage increase for VA disability compensation,
Right.
and also for dependency and indemnity compensation, or DIC, for surviving families.
The two systems are legally tied at the hip.
They really are. And hey, if you're finding these discussions helpful, please subscribe to Veteran Briefing so you never miss important updates and practical information for veterans and their families.
Absolutely. And staying informed on this is vital because, well, while that 3.1% from July is our starting line, it is obviously not the finish line.
Right. We still have August and September data to roll in.
We do. However, securing that first concrete data point has allowed the major financial organizations and senior advocacy groups to step up and release their formal mathematically modeled projections for the final October announcement.
Yeah, and we have 3 major forecasts to evaluate right now, and they're clustered pretty tightly together.
They are, yeah.
First, Mary Johnson, who is a very prominent independent Social Security and Medicare policy analyst, is currently projecting a 3.4% COLA for 2027.
Okay.
Then we have AARP coming in just slightly higher. They're projecting a 3.5% increase based on this new government data.
Right, and put that into a tangible perspective. AARP notes that a 3.5% increase would raise the average retired worker's Social Security benefit by about $73 per month. Obviously, your specific VA or retirement check will vary wildly based on your disability rating or benefit level, but that $73 provides a baseline dollar amount for the average retiree.
Makes sense. And rounding out the consensus, we have the Senior Citizens League. They're a nonpartisan advocacy group, and they estimate it will land just a bit higher than the others at 3.6%.
So the current window of expectation, based on all credible analysis of this July data, is firmly between 3.4% and 3.6%.
Okay, let's unpack this. The analysts are celebrating this drop to the 3.4% range because they claim inflation is cooling, but I want to push back on that narrative entirely.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you look at the source data, Mary Johnson's current projection of 3.4% is significantly lower than what she was saying just a few months ago. In June, she was forecasting a massive 4.7% increase.
Yeah, and the Senior Citizens League also dropped their estimate from 3.8% down to 3.6%. It's definitely a noticeable downward trend over the summer.
But here is my pushback. If I'm a veteran walking into the grocery store or, trying to pay rent, prices haven't actually gone down. They just aren't rising as fast as they were last year.
That's true.
A smaller raise feels like a penalty when everything around you is still objectively, painfully expensive.
Right.
Why the sudden drop? Is this actually bad news? I mean, are these financial analysts sitting in office buildings just completely out of touch with the reality of a veteran on a fixed income?
That is a highly valid criticism, and it really gets to the heart of the difference between how economists view data and how humans experience life.
Right.
The analysts aren't necessarily out of touch, but they are using terminology that feels misleading to the average consumer. When economists say inflation is cooling, they're talking about disinflation.
Which means what exactly?
It simply means the rate of acceleration has slowed down, prices are still going up, just at a 3% speed limit instead of an 8% speed limit.
So they are celebrating that the car's only going 30 miles an hour toward the cliff instead of 80?
Yeah, that is one way to visualize it. What veterans are actually hoping for when they hear cooling is deflation, where prices actually reverse and go back down to where they were in 2020.
Which never happens.
Right, deflation is incredibly rare and usually signals a severe economic recession. So the reality of a 3.5% COLA is that the compounding effect of the last few years is locked in. The high prices for a carton of eggs or a used vehicle or rent, those are sticky. They aren't going back down.
Oh, okay.
The 3.5% raise you get next year is just being applied on top of an already heavily inflated baseline. That is why a shrinking COLA estimate feels like you are losing ground, even if the macroeconomic data suggests the economy is stabilizing.
Which makes the historical context of all this so important, because if we are permanently operating at this higher baseline of cost, we really need to know if a 3.5% increase is actually going to be enough to sustain a veteran's purchasing power.
Let's look at the historical timeline, because historically speaking, a 3.5% projection is robust. Yeah. The long-term historical average for the cost of living adjustment, going back decades, is only about 2.6%.
Oh, wow.
And if you isolate just the past 10 years, the COLA has averaged about 3.1%. So whether we land at Mary Johnson's conservative 3.4% or the Senior Citizens League's 3.6%, we are still sitting comfortably above both the 10-year average and the long-term historical average.
See, I think the reason a number like 3.5% might feel a little underwhelming or even disappointing to some veterans today is just because of the absolute roller coaster we have been on recently.
Oh, completely.
In 2022, we saw a massive 5.9% increase, and then in 2023, we saw an unbelievable 8.7% spike. Those numbers really stick in your memory.
They do, but we have to remember that those were historically abnormal increases. They were driven by extraordinary global events, unprecedented stimulus injections, and massive supply chain crises.
Right, they weren't normal.
Exactly. They were emergency responses, not standard economic growth.
It's almost like navigating a ship through a massive hurricane. The 5.9 and 8.7% increases weren't bonuses. They were massive, sudden steering corrections just to keep the ship from capsizing during the storm.
That's a perfect analogy.
And we got used to the captain violently spinning the wheel. Now that the storm is passing, the waters have calmed down, and we're back to making minor standard adjustments, like a 3.5% turn, just to stay on course. It feels slow by comparison, but it just means we aren't in an emergency anymore.
The hurricane metaphor is very apt. We are returning to a more sustainable, normalized cruising speed for the broader economy, even if we are now sailing at a permanently higher sea level regarding overall prices.
Right.
And for everyone planning their 2027 budgets, it is critical to keep the timeline in mind. We are still navigating this process.
Because we only have the July data, we are still waiting for the August and September inflation numbers to finalize that third quarter exam.
Correct. Once September concludes, the Bureau of Labor Statistics will crunch the final numbers. The Social Security Administration typically makes the official locked-in COLA announcement in mid-October.
So that is the moment we'll know the exact percentage down to the decimal point.
Exactly. Once announced, that percentage is applied across the board, and the resulting raise goes into effect for the first payment you receive at the very end of December, effectively kicking off your 2027 benefit year.
Okay, so if we accept that the CLA is just an automatic adjustment designed to keep us treading water at this new, higher sea level of prices, and it's completely out of our control, how do we actually get ahead? What financial levers can a veteran actually pull right now, rather than just passively waiting for mid-October?
This is where we shift from passive observation to active strategy. And the source material and veteran advocacy groups emphasize this constantly. If you need a significant life-changing boost to your income, the real raise does not come from waiting on a 3 or 4% inflation bump from the government.
Right.
The only financial lever you directly control is your VA disability claim. The real raise comes from ensuring your VA disability rating accurately and comprehensively reflects your current state of health.
We really need to dive deep into the mechanics of this, because the financial disparity between an annual COLA and a rating increase is staggering. And it all comes down to understanding the notoriously confusing mechanism known as VA math.
Oh boy, VA math.
Right. A lot of veterans think it's just straight addition. They think, well, if they have a 50% rating for PTSD and they successfully claim a new 30% rating for migraines, they're going to get an 80% total rating.
Which makes sense logically, but that is not how the system works. It is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the benefit system.
Totally.
The VA does not use standard addition. They use a descending efficiency scale, often called the whole person theory.
Let's break that down, because understanding this is the absolute key to strategizing your claims. Under the whole person theory, the VA views you as a 100% efficient person. If you are awarded a 50% disability rating, the VA says you are now 50% disabled, but crucially, that means you are still 50% healthy.
Exactly. So when they calculate your next condition, let's say that 30% rating for migraines, they don't add 30 to 50.
Right.
They take 30% of your remaining healthy self. So 30% of the remaining 50% is 15%. You add that 15% to your original 50%, giving you a raw score of 65%, which the VA then rounds up to a 70% overall rating.
Knowing how that calculation works is vital, because it illustrates how difficult it becomes to climb into the higher rating tiers, especially going from 80% to 100%.
Oh, it gets incredibly steep.
But it also highlights the massive financial reward for successfully doing so. If you are at a 50% rating today, a 3.5% COLA increase next year might give you an extra $40 or $50 a month. It helps cover the increased cost of groceries, sure, but it doesn't change your life. However, if your conditions have legitimately worsened and you utilize an understanding of VA math to successfully file a claim for an increase that moves you from 50% to 80% or 90%, that rating bump dwarfs the COLA.
Absolutely dwarfs it.
That could mean an increase of $1,000 or more every single month, completely tax-free.
It is a fundamental difference in financial strategy. The annual cost of living adjustment is a defensive mechanism. It is a shield designed to protect your purchasing power from being eroded by inflation over time. It keeps you from sinking.
Exactly.
But actively managing your VA claims, continuously gathering your medical evidence, and filing for increases when your service-connected conditions deteriorate, that is your offensive strategy. That is how you actually advance your financial security and ensure the system is properly compensating you for the sacrifices you made.
So as we look toward the mid-October announcement, we know we are likely landing in that 3.4 to 3.6% window based on the fresh July CPI-W data.
Yeah.
And while those numbers represent a moderation in inflation compared to the massive spikes of 2022 and 2023, they still sit well above the long-term historical average, locking in those sticky, higher prices we are all dealing with.
And you will see that official percentage applied to your benefits starting with your end of December payment.
Which brings us to the most practical action you can take right now. Do not just sit back and watch the calendar. Take time this week to pull your current VA disability ratings and review your recent medical records.
Good advice.
Be brutally honest with yourself about whether your service-connected conditions have worsened over the last few years. If they have, begin the process of filing a claim for an increase. That is where your true financial advancement lies.
Take control of the elements you can actually influence.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a structural question to mull over. We spent a lot of time today discussing the CPI-W, the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. This entire CLA system is dictated by a metric explicitly built around the spending habits, housing costs, and transportation needs of city workers. So, here's the question. Does a metric designed for urban wage earners inherently fail to capture the real-world inflation and unique rising costs experienced by retired veterans living out in rural America?
That's a great point.
Are the costs of living, driving long distances for healthcare, and surviving in a rural community being ignored by an urban-centric formula?
It is a profound systemic question, and it really exposes the friction of trying to apply a single, rigid mathematical formula to millions of veterans living in vastly different economic realities across the entire country.
We would absolutely love to hear your perspective on this. Do the official inflation numbers match the reality of what you are paying at your local grocery store or for your housing? Jump into the comments section and share your experiences, not just with inflation, but with navigating the VA claims process and VA math as well.
Yeah, your insights and strategies might be exactly the motivation another veteran needs to hear today to finally file for their own increase.
And please, remember to subscribe, like the video, and share this deep dive with your fellow veterans and military families so they can stay ahead of the curve alongside you. Thank you for watching Veteran Briefing. Take care, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next episode.